Hello there, and welcome to the channel. My name is Videosyncratic, and this is my series tackling the flags used in Europa Universalis IV from a historical perspective and attempting to find their origins. The subject of today's episode are the formable nations of the Indian subcontinent, although a few forays into Central Asia are also included. I will warn you up front that the introduction of this episode is a little longer than usual, so skipping ahead or using the table of contents which should be pinned in the comment section below is even more important if you're just looking for one nation in particular. Anyway, after making a number of these episodes, I think it is safe to say that the formable nations of EU4 can be split into approximately 3 categories. These are nations which did exist after 1444, those which used to exist prior to this date, and those nations which never existed but either could have existed or represent a challenge to the player to form something, even if it isn't particularly historically plausible. The first 3 flags of this episode are all from that third category, nations which can be formed in Europa Universalis IV but which did not exist in real life, at least not in this exact form, or not in the time period covered by the game. The first of these flags is that of Bharat, which is a more authentic name for India, being an endonym originating in ancient Indian epic poetry and being passed down into most of the languages of India via Sanskrit. This tag certainly didn't come into existence in real life, especially within the EU4 timeframe, as it represents an undivided India united either by Hindus, Buddhists or Sikhs. Despite the present-day republic being secular, Bharat is a kind of retrospective adaptation of modern India. This is certainly suggested by its in-game flag, which is based on the present flag of India. This is a horizontal triband in orange, white and green, and was adopted a few weeks before India's independence in 1947, although it was based on an earlier design proposed by Mahatma Gandhi in 1921. According to the philosopher 𝘍𝘭𝘢𝘨 Radhakrishnan, who would later become the second president of India, the colour symbolism is as follows. Orange, or to be more precise, saffron, represents disinterest in worldly values, signifying sacrifice and an important quality to avoid corrupt leadership. It should be noted that these connotations come from Hinduism, and saffron is generally considered to be the most sacred colour amongst Hindus. White represents the light guiding the nation to the path of truth. It was also added to better display the central device of the flag, and may also represent the many religious minorities present throughout India. Green represents the fertility of the land and the relation between the people and the soil upon which they depend. The colour green also has a long-running association with Islam and may be considered representative of the Muslims of India. Please be aware that the religious interpretation of the Indian flag is controversial, but you can find it in a number of sources, and so it would be remiss for me not to mention it here. The only difference between the contemporary Indian flag and the one used by Bharat lays in the central symbol. In real life, this is the Ashoka chakra, but in EU4, this is replaced by a special character referred to as 𝘍𝘭𝘢𝘨, amongst other names. This is a spiritual symbol representing a sacred sound, usually chanted before religious recitations and during meditation. 𝘍𝘭𝘢 is present in Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, and as you may expect from this broad range, there is a similar diversity in its interpretation. In Hinduism, it represents concepts such as the inner self, the universe and the ultimate reality. It is often used to represent Hinduism generally, a point further strengthened by the use of the 𝘍𝘭𝘢 as the in-game religious symbol of Hinduism. In a very similar situation to Bharat is Hindustan, which similarly takes its design almost wholesale from a current national flag. The tag of Hindustan is intended to represent an India united under the rule of native Muslims. Also like Bharat, Hindustan is an alternative name for India, albeit one which was originally an exonym, coming from Middle Persian and originally meaning the land of 7 rivers. As such, Hindu is a geographic expression rather than a religious one, at least in this context. The in-game flag of Hindustan is almost identical to the present-day flag of Pakistan, just with the removal of the hoist side white stripe. This leaves a white star and crescent on a green field. Much of the symbolism of this flag is religious. As mentioned previously, the colour green is highly associated with Islam, with it being the favourite colour of the Prophet and representative of paradise. Despite these connotations still being popular, the use of the star and crescent as representative of Islam is a contentious issue. An alternative reading of the crescent is that it represents progress, while the star can still be interpreted from a religious angle, with its 5 points being representative of the 5 pillars of Islam. The final flag of these 3 hypothetical nations is that of Rajputana. This flag gave me a fair bit of trouble, and while I am reasonably pleased with my final assessment of it, if you have any information on this particular design, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. To explain this flag, I believe it is useful to briefly explain what a Rajput was. Simply put, the Rajputs were a large and varied grouping of warriors with a developed ideology of their own nobility. Their collective name comes from Sanskrit and can be taken to mean son of a king. While the Rajputs originated largely in the present-day state of Rajasthan, they ended up spreading all over India during the time of EU4, and many came to rule kingdoms throughout the subcontinent. As I understand it, the Rajputana tag exists in-game to reward the player for managing to unite every Rajput state under one ruler, an outcome that did not occur in real life. Their flag shows a 12-rayed golden sun and bears some resemblance to a flag supposedly used by the Rajputana agency. This was a political office established by the British to oversee a collection of princely states, most of which were ruled by Rajput dynasties, and located in what is now Rajasthan. However, I accept that I have not been able to find any other references to this flag so far. Although the veracity of this flag is questionable, what matters is the common use of the image of a sun. The origin of this is from the idea of the so-called solar dynasty, more accurately called the Suryavansh. This dynasty is detailed in the Puranas, that is, ancient Indian literature, and as a result, it is one of the oldest known of all Indian dynasties. Like many dynasties, its name comes from its alleged founder, which in this instance is Surya, the god of the sun. As a highly prestigious and long-established dynasty, many Rajput rulers claimed ultimate descent from this house, and hence used the sun as a personal or dynastic symbol. We now move on to the flags of those nations that have actually existed at some point in history. Like Bharat and Hindustan, the first of these appropriates a contemporary national flag, and the tag in question is Nepal. The flag of Nepal needs little introduction, as the fact that it is the only non-quadrilateral national flag in current use has lent it quite the degree of notoriety. As for why it is this shape, is simply a matter of historical chance. Nearly all early modern period Indian flags were triangular in shape, and many were flown one above the other, which would eventually combine into one flag in the case of Nepal. Ultimately, other states which used triangular flags fell, or caved into pressure and adopted more typical designs, but Nepal stuck by their decision, and there has been no indication this is going to change in the near future. The modern meaning of the flag is that the crimson field represents courage, which sits in contrast with its blue border, representing peace and harmony. Officially, the 2 points of the flag represent the 2 most important religions of Nepal, Hinduism and Buddhism. The theme of duality is repeated throughout the flag, with the presence of the sun and the moon, which, like most celestial bodies, are intended to represent longevity and permanence of the state. In addition to other contrasts, they can also be interpreted as a reference to the varied geography of Nepal, with the cold moon reflecting the high Himalayas and the hot sun the warm and dry Nepali lowlands. While this category is intended for singular nations that formed at some point after 1444, the formable nation of Punjab is something of an exception, as it is used to represent a few different states in that general area. What it is most likely intended to refer to, as confirmed by the flag chosen for this tag, are the various Sikh states. These began as a confederacy of sovereign states in approximately 1716, before eventually coalescing into the Sikh Empire at the end of that century. The in-game flag of Punjab is taken directly from a Sikh flag called the Nishan Sahib. This pennant displays a symbol called the Khanda on a field of varying colour. Today, the most common version features a red or deep orange field as seen in-game. This originates from the rule of Ranjit Singh, the first Maharaja of the Sikh Empire. Prior to this, the field had instead been a shade of yellow called Basanti. Returning to the central device of this flag, the Khanda has gained sufficient influence that it is often considered the most prominent symbol of Sikhism, and it is used as such in-game. The symbol comprises 3 different elements, each of which is a weapon. The centre shows a double-edged sword, which is itself called a Khanda. This sword is encircled by a ring-shaped throwing weapon called a chakar. This is perhaps better known as a chakram in the West. At the base of this are 2 crossed single-edged swords, generically referred to as kirpans. The symbol is a representation of the Sikh slogan Deg Teg Fateh, which literally translates to victory to kettle and sword, meaning victory to charity and arms. Once again, we will return to the importance of the colour orange throughout India due to the prevalence of that colour in Hinduism. In EU4, the flag of Maratha is nothing more than a saffron rectangle. This is directly based on the actual flag used by the Maratha Empire, called the Bhagwa Dhwaj, literally meaning the saffron flag, with the sole difference being its shape, as it ought to be of a swallow-tailed design. With regards to the next flag on the list, it would be useful for me to briefly describe who the Marathas actually were. In many ways, they were similar to the Rajputs, covered earlier in this episode, in that they were an amalgamation of originally humble families who took up arms in the 16th century and would ultimately become soldiers and rulers of great renown. The Marathas were split amongst a number of clans, and all of them originated from Maharashtra. Indeed, the term Maratha was previously used to refer to all speakers of the Marathi language, but over time gradually came to refer only to this warrior group. Returning to the subject of their flag, while the Maratha Empire was remarkably religiously tolerant for its time and routinely filled its high offices with people from a variety of religious backgrounds, the Hindu origins of the state are also undeniable and clearly reflected in the colour of their flag. In the case of the Marathas, the colour saffron is especially associated with the god Shiva, as the school of Shaivism, which regards Shiva as the supreme being, was especially prominent amongst the Marathas. The next flag is also one of a Maratha state, although I do have some bad news. I hate to have to admit defeat like this, but unfortunately I have been unable to find a satisfactory explanation for the flag used by Nagpur. Have you ever seen this flag before, or at least, have you ever seen a flag similar to it? Some of the flags in EU4 are seemingly made from scratch, and this may be one of them. However, its design seems too specific to me not to be referencing something, and at the very least, I would like to know what the designers' thought processes were when they were creating this flag. In lieu of being able to provide a satisfactory explanation for this flag, I will instead go over what the tag of Nagpur was intended to represent, and hazard some guesses as to what this flag could mean. As revealed by the game's history notes, Nagpur is currently set to represent 2 distinct kingdoms. The first is a Gondi kingdom, which was established by the Gondi rulers of Deoghar, centred in what is now Madhya Pradesh. After the death of the last Gondi ruler, a succession dispute broke out, which led to the second period where it was ruled by the Bhosale clan starting from 1739. The Bhosales were one of the Maratha clans, and under their rule, the area was a part of the Maratha Empire, even if this was only nominal at times. The question remains, what do I think this flag was intended to show? Well, first things first, the flag clearly shows a sun, similar to the case of Rajputana. In a similar manner, this likely references the supposed origin of the Bhosale clan, as they were another Indian dynasty to trace their lineage back to the Suryavansh. In addition to the sun, there appears to be some form of heavily stylized text in a script I have been unable to identify. Judging from its rounded form, this may actually be the Gondi alphabet, reflecting Nagpur's origins. However, I appreciate that I really am clutching at straws here, and any input you may have on the matter would be very much appreciated. The final flag of southern India before we move north is that of the Deccan, which represents the Mughal successor state of Hyderabad. The state of Hyderabad began its life as a territory of the Mughal Empire under a kind of viceroy titled the Nizam. Due to the lengthy decline of the Mughal Empire, the Deccan essentially became independent in about 1724, although it was one of the first monarchies of India to be drawn ever closer into the British sphere of influence. It is actually from this later period that the in-game flag of the Deccan appears to originate. As far as I can tell, this flag is taken from a French language postcard published in around 1900. This was created by a Swiss company celebrating the different ways in which post was delivered around the world. Unfortunately, I have been unable to find any other sources indicating this flag was ever in use, and so it remains something of a mystery. The move from primarily Hindu nations to primarily Muslim ones is immediately made obvious by the fact that these next flags are all various shades of green. The next two on our list to be covered are those of the Mughal Empire and Persia. Normally, I try to cover each flag individually, but when there is enough overlap in their design, it only makes sense to lump them in as one. As shown by their similar designs, the flags used by both the Mughals and Persia share a common origin, and both use the image of a lion in front of the sun. This symbol is called the alam in Persian. The basis of this image is actually really old, with it likely starting out as a Babylonian astrological sign for when the sun is in the house of Leo. Regardless of these unexpected origins, due to the easy interpretation of this symbol, it has come to have a number of different interpretations. This is further exacerbated by the fact that the general Persian word for king, Shah, is almost a homophone for the word for lion, Shah, in many dialects. The Mughals are incredibly important to Indian history, and yet their origins are fairly hard to grasp. I have heard it put that they were highly Persianized Turco-Mongols who ruled over most of India, but this still doesn't quite do them justice. Suffice to say, they were incredibly diverse and much more than just the sum of their parts. The Mughals actually considered their own dynasty to be an extension of the Timurid Empire, and the Mughal use of the alam is supposed to trace back to its use by Timur, although unfortunately, it seems that little else is known about their use of this flag. Compared to the Mughals, the use of the alam by Persia is much better understood, likely because it was in use much longer and in fact was used by the monarchs of Iran until their overthrow in the 1979 revolution. The usage of the lion and the sun began under the Safavid dynasty. By the time of the rule of Shah Abbas the Great in the late 16th century, the popular meaning of this flag had been set so that the sun and the lion represented the two pillars of society, that is, religion and the state. The Safavids were the first Iranian dynasty to follow Shia Islam, and much of their authority as rulers stemmed from religion. As a result of this connection, the alam also picked up religious connotations, with the lion being believed to represent Ali, an extremely important personage in Shia Islam, as well as representing the dual role of the Shah, for he was both ruler and religious leader. I did struggle with where to put the final flag of this episode, Bukhara, but I ultimately decided to put it next to the Mughals as, while they are most famous for their rule over India, their dynasty did originate in Central Asia. The flag used by the Emirate of Bukhara is actually just a simplified version of that used by the Uzbeks, the only nation which is actually capable of forming Bukhara in EU full. As for the Uzbek flag, in a bizarre case of recursive adaptation, this has actually been taken from the flag used by the real-life Emirate of Bukhara after its declaration of independence from the collapsing Russian Empire in 1917. As an Islamic emirate, the use of the colour green for its field is only natural, and the hand motif is also quite a common one in Islam, where it is usually called the Khamsa or the Hand of Fatima, after the daughter of the Prophet. Due to the time this flag is from, the inclusion of the star and crescent was likely inspired by the flag of the Ottoman Empire, which was highly influential on many of the flags adopted throughout the Islamic world during that period. Finally, the text on the right is the Shahada, which is very commonly seen on the flags of Islamic nations, while that on the left likely reads, "The Sultan is the shadow of God." Thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you have enjoyed it. I will apologise, as Indian history, although I do try, it really isn't one of my strong suits, so I am liable to have made a few mistakes here and there, and if you do spot any mistakes, then please let me know. In next week's episode, I am finally going to finish the rest of the Formable nations, and so I will end up taking quite the tour through the Middle East, Africa, and even my first forays into the New World. If you've enjoyed this video, then please consider leaving a like, sharing it to get the word out there, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then please even consider subscribing. Additionally, I always love hearing from you all, so please use the comment section or the channel discussion page to your heart's delight. Once again, thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Goodbye for now, ciao!